All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this conversation, I'm joined by two people I have not spoken to in quite a few years. As some viewers know, I used to live in Los Angeles, and my two guests are people who are very important to my experience out there. So it's been just a fantastic opportunity to connect with them for this conversation to come. I'm delighted to be joined by Dave Travis and David O. Jones of Carnage Asada. Gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Great to see you both.
Nice. Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Joel. Yeah.
Absolutely. David, I was thinking the last time I saw you face to face, such as it is, was 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that for the Magnolia Thunder Pussy show or?
Yeah, that was at the Echo.
Yeah.
Long time ago. Long
Yeah.
time ago. So, I mean, we've obviously spoken since then. And both of you guys were actually guests on my audio podcast back in 2011. So I did kind of like an LA special episode, had you guys on and had Dim Wanker, rest in peace from F Word, Lauren from the Dogs, who's been on the channel as well. So it's been quite a few years. So we're about 13 years overdue for a proper interview again. And Dave, I last saw you New Year's Eve 2017 at Cafe Nella when Chetan and Rick Agnew played.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a while, and we're getting together because there's some really exciting news with Carnage Asada, which for those folks who are unfamiliar with the band, this is a project you both have been involved in for decades now, since the early 90s. And this coming Friday, which would be the 23rd, the band is releasing its first album in 25 years, a record called Head on a Platter. And there is a record release party as well, which we'll definitely get into. So there's a lot happening in just a few days. But I guess the first and most obvious question is, I know Carnage Asada is kind of synonymous with Los Angeles live music. You've been around for so many years. Why was now the right time to do another studio album after so long?
Probably earlier was the right time to do it, and we just finally did it.
Yeah. I think the impetus for this album, Joel, was really um it was really coming out of the pandemic. I was, personally, I was so bummed not to be able to play music. I had gigs lined up with Alice Bagg, who I also play with, and we were going to go to England, and we had a whole bunch of shows for her album that came out in 2020. It all got canceled, and it was a couple years of just, not being able to play, being really, it's hard. It's hard for musicians. You know, we our whole thing is kind of built on feedback from seeing other people, playing in front of people, being in the community, playing live shows, and um, not to have that was very, very tough emotionally. And then during that time, sort of as we were coming out of that, um, we all kind of reached out to each other. I don't know how it happened, Dave. I think it was just by email or something, right?
Yeah,
We kind
email
of
or
got
message.
in
Yeah.
touch. Yeah, and we were just like, we got kind of, we were like, we should play or we should get together and jam at least. And then Tony Fate, our guitar player, kind of got us motivated. He was like, we need to do new songs. We need to change it up, get into new things, and we all embraced that, and we just started writing. I started writing a bunch of tunes, and Tony started writing a bunch of tunes, and Dave wrote some tunes, um, and then we finally got together at Steve Reed's house, our drummer. Finally went over there and got practicing again, and uh, it was so great to play music again. It was really celebratory, and it made me feel great. And Carnage, was the first thing that I did kind of coming back out of the pandemic musically. and it felt so right. It was like, oh yeah, we need to be together. This is a great band. We've been going 30 years. Let's do new stuff. So that was the whole idea behind it was, hey, let's put together a bunch of new tunes. And I was building a studio at the time. And so we recorded it at my place. And also around that time, Geza X, who Dave Travis had been working with, uh, hit up Dave and said, "Hey, I want to do a single with you guys with Carnage Asada." And you can talk more about that, Dave.
Yeah, we played a show with Gaze X at the Redwood, and he liked our music, and then I was working with him too, so he has a new label out, Gaze X Records. He's doing Naughty Women and Strict 999 and a bunch of bands like that, and so we did a digital signal with him, and it gave us impetus to start recording. We recorded it at Dave's house with Dave and his son Sebastian, and um, it it helped us make like a step forward, just to be recording and be in the digital era. The last time we recorded other stuff, but the last time we had anything released was 1999 on CD, and then the whole like digital thing happened, and we never really got into the 21st century. So now's our chance. Now it's a quarter of the way through.
Right. Excellent. And it's a funny thing because I've known of your band for years. I knew of you when I lived in LA back about 20 years ago. But as I prepared for today's conversation, I thought to myself, how do I describe this band to the viewer who's never heard you before? And even as a writer, I was kind of like struggling with that. So I have to give props to the PR team that you currently work with, because I actually saw the press release that went out for the album, and the description is absolutely perfect, and I'll read it. Um, Carnage Asada will appeal to fans of the Minutemen, James Brown, Curtis Mayfield, Black Flag, the Stooges, Hawkwind, Captain Beefheart, War, and the Mothers of Invention. Perfect. That I Whoever wrote that gets a gold star, because that is exactly what I would have put together if my brain chemistry was working properly, because that's just a perfect description of your sound. So let's kind of start there, with the actual aesthetic sonically of Carnage Asada. Um, and the band goes back to the early 90s, although you guys have been friends since the early 80s. I think you two and George the singer all went to school together, right?
Yeah,
That's
we went to junior high and high school together, and Jones and I had a band together in high school too.
What was the name of that group?
Permanent Trails.
Okay,
Permanent
okay.
Trails. I mean, we played the cafe once at like Dollar Tuesday, and then we played parties, and that was about the extent of it. Dollar Tuesday was probably our big Hollywood show.
Yeah.
Right on. And I know, from prior conversations with you both, you grew up, came up certainly during the height of Los Angeles punk, when a lot of those classic 80s bands were still functioning, obviously with Black Flag being at the top of the tree, certainly. But there was a lot of eclecticism along the way. I know even with Magnolia Thunder Pussy, Dave, that record that was recorded back then and released, in the early 2000s, has a lot of variety to it. So when Carnage Asada began as a group, was there kind of a stated musical purpose, or was it just let's kind of put things against the wall and see what sticks?
I
Now
think it
we
was more just we just started jamming in the garage.
yeah,
The purpose was to play together and see what happened.
yeah.
Jones
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, we started with Pat Palma from Magnolia Thunder Pussy on drums, and my friend Jesse Engel on guitar, and then and Dave and I, and Dave was playing electric bass too. So we always had two basses or two people playing in the bass register. That's the only I mean, it wasn't a concept. We just both played bass, so we were just kind of both doing it. And then I think Dave, you reached out to George, who was living in Venice, right?
Yeah, because it was just the music, like he was the perfect singer for that music, and he's a really poetic person, and he was the person that always should have been in a band, and so this was the band for him to be in.
This is the perfect band for him. He just could let it, he could let it loose because, Dave Travis and Jesse and Pat were all really interested in improvising. So they were coming, all of them love free jazz. I love free jazz too. I love Ornette and some of the crazier out Coltrane too. So and Dolphy. So, we just wanted to make some noise and get fucking crazy. And so it was great. And George, like Dave said, is the perfect front man to weave his poetic, visions on the top of that. And we've been doing it ever since. I think that was what, 92 or something, Dave? 93 in the garage?
Yeah, 93.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I know you had a name certainly when I was out in LA. Carnage Asada was kind of like, this is a great band, and it's a musicians kind of band, right? And people really dug what you were doing. And I know over the years there have been different appearances and contributions from some pretty interesting people. Des Cadena played with you guys. Joe Biza, the great Joe Biza from Saccharine Trust, Dave from Painted Willie, and quite a few others as well. But it seems like the lineup has kind of been a lot more consistent in recent years. Yourself, George, and you said you have a couple of kind of long-term members as well, kind of filling out the band. Who else is rounding out the group these days?
The lineup got pretty consistent in 2008 when Tony joined. And so then with the 2008 lineup, it was Steve Reed on drums, Dave Jones on bass, myself on cello, Tony Fane on guitar, and George singing, and Chris Stein on bass. And then we did that lineup till Chris got sick, and then started playing without Chris. And then coming out of COVID, back to that lineup. But recently we've added Vince Maroney on winds and percussion, and also some shows with Dan Klukas, who plays on the album on trumpet. And Vince has a really pretty amazing musical history too. He played with Fatso Jetson. He had his band Atomic Sherpas. Um, he's played with everybody. Melodiacs. So that's our lineup now. But it used to be like, yeah, in the 1990s, like we didn't even know who was gonna. It was whoever showed up would be who was in the band. But now it's a consistent
Yeah.
lineup.
Well, Steve Reed, who plays drums with us, Steve's been in the band since like 1994. He was like
Yeah,
our, I mean, he goes way back with us. Steve is our veteran, and he like when Steve first joined, our original band had kind of fallen apart, and he joined, and he was our fourth member, and he was just playing bass, and then we got Dave Markey on drums, and Dave was our drummer from Sin 34 and from Painted Willie for quite a number of years. I mean, he put in a lot of do with us and took us really far. He was great with us. So, but as Dave said, it changed. The lineup changed, but Steve Reed's still with us and Tony Fate's still with us, and we always think about Chris Stein is always with us in our hearts. we love Chris and think about him. And we do have an album recorded with Chris that Chris was really, um, I would say he kind of wrote most of the songs, or if he didn't write most of them, he was kind of spearheading the musical direction, which he tends to do. I mean, if you talk to Joe Baiza for Saccharine Trust, you'll find that Chris was really a musical director for that band, which is, you know, pretty crazy considering you got, you know, Joe Baiza and Jack Brewer. But Chris really drove the band in the later years. And he was really doing that, I think, in Carnage, right, Dave, to a large
Yeah.
extent, coming up with riffs and really directing the band in a lot of ways. So we have an album in the can with Chris, and that'll be, you know, something that hopefully we can get to putting out maybe next year. Once we have digital distribution for this album, then
Hmm.
we can start, you know, putting the Carnage stuff that's missing into the catalog.
Yeah, that'd be great. And for the viewer who doesn't know Chris Stein, as David mentioned, Chris was the bass player for Saccharine Trust, which is how I got to know him. To kind of throw my own personal history into it for a minute, in 2002, a friend of mine who had moved to Los Angeles, we're both from New Jersey, college friends. He had moved out and he had booked some shows that summer with Cale Johansson from the Urinals playing guitar. And he said, "Hey, I know you're looking to come out on vacation. Why don't you come out and play these shows I have booked with Cale?" And I said, "Well, of course, you know, who would pass that up?" So I went to LA, stayed in Venice at this guy's house, and we learned like a 10-song set and did two shows. One was on, is it KXLU?
Yeah,
Mhm.
probably.
Yeah, live on the air. And then the second show was a place by the airport. I think it's called the Westchester Grill or something like that. Something like that. But the bill for that show was us, the Chuck Dukowski Sextet. So that was the first day I met Chuck and Nora and Saccharine Trust, who I was listening to in Jersey when, you know, Pagan Icons and stuff like that. So I knew the band. So I'm kind of thinking that whole week, do I want to live in New Jersey anymore, or should I just move to Los Angeles and be done with it? So we play the show, but I start, you know, I meet Chuck, I meet Nora, and they're cool, you know, of course. And I got to know Cale playing with him for 1 week as his drummer. And but I met Chris Stein in the parking lot, and you know, we were loading out stuff, and we got talking, and we had a really great conversation. And I'm thinking, you know, everybody I've met out here is so cool and so of the same wavelength that I'm on. I'm going to move here next year. And that's exactly what I did. And I lived in LA for 3 years. So it was really Chris Stein who subconsciously got me to move to Los Angeles. You know, had Chris been a jerk, I probably would have said, nah, I'm going to stay where I am. But he was one of those very cool, very talented, welcoming musicians in Los Angeles. And you know, so I always had a very strong fondness for Saccharine Trust from that point on. And about a year before Chris had passed, you know, Facebook, everything is so rapid fire, and you mean to reach out to somebody, but you don't for a while, and then. But I eventually found Chris Stein on Facebook, and we had actually reconnected, um, you know, before he had passed. So I was really grateful for that. But um, fantastic musician. Anybody who's watching this who hasn't heard Chris Stein, he did a great album with Saccharine Trust. Uh, I think the most recent Saccharine Trust album actually has Chris Stein on it. I'm going to put a link in the video description for some of Chris's music, in addition to Carnage Asada. So people who are watching this who want to check out what he did, I would definitely recommend that. Um, you know, so first of all, I'm sorry for the loss, you know, that took place, and I'm glad that the band is still active, and certainly very excited to hear that there's archival stuff featuring Chris that may come out, you know, in the not too distant future under Carnage Asada. That's really fantastic. But for you guys, I mean, you knew him better than I did, certainly, because you had worked with him for so long. What do you think he brought musically to the Carnage Asada experience that was unique to his contribution?
I mean, from my perspective as a bass player, uh, Chris has a unique style of playing, and I would say just a very his own aesthetic and personality and musicality. And boy, it was so much fun to play with him and to play second base, so to speak, with Chris. It was fun. He and I would sort of trade off, high parts and low parts, harmonies to each other, or contrapuntal melodies to each other. But he had some great ideas. He wrote tunes like Zombie Funk, which is a really cool, trippy, funky tune with two bass, and people say it reminded. I think Vince Maroney once said it reminded him of Defunct, that band Defunct,
Hmm.
and but he had a really really interesting style. There's a song Gasoline Sock that he did that goes with George's lyrics perfectly. It's really weird and sludgy, almost like it's a kind of atonal and sludgy sounding and dirgy, uh, and it works perfectly with George's lyrics about a guy on the RTD bus that he saw, a cholo guy, with uh, like a handkerchief and sniffing gasoline on the bus and freaking out. So yeah, has a unique style.
Mhm.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, he brought kind of like a little nardcore influence too, coming from Simi Valley, and he had his previous band before Saccharine called Citizen Down, and so he brought a kind of harder and heavier influence to us too, but also he just had like a lot of heart too. Um, it's kind of like the heart of the band. But so I guess kind of like a heaviness and a quicker tempo, but also yeah, like a quirkiness too. Like he had his own sound, like Dave said. It was he sounded like Chris Stein playing bass, which I guess is a good compliment for a musician. Is they sound like they self-realize their music.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, watching Saccharine Trust circa 2003, 2004. I mean, when Richie Haas was still in the band too, also rest in peace. What a band, and the guys I was playing with at the time, we did quite a few shows with them and Dukowski's Sextet, often on the same bill. And we did a show with Geza as well. And to be like around those kind of musicians, it just kind of showed the possibilities because obviously they all came from what would sometimes lazily be described as Los Angeles punk. And then they sort of transcended and went somewhere else, and that was always a joy to watch. And that's why I love Carnage Asada so much, because I think you're kind of carrying, and I have always carried on that tradition of let's take music somewhere else. It doesn't have to just be, as great as Nervous Breakdown is, we already have that record. We don't need to hear it again from another band. And you guys fill that role and that you're taking it somewhere else, which kind of leads me to my next question because I've listened to the album quite a bit. And what I hear is some of the material, particularly with like Blood of Thorns, for example, I'm thinking that song live could go on, for multiple minutes, and there can be like these outrageous jams going on. So, uh, do you have a different approach when you record in the studio versus live, or do you kind of have that sense of, anything can happen in the studio as it can on the stage? Do you make sort of a different philosophy with the band between the two extremes?
No, like when it came to recording, it was y- you know with Carnage, we always like to jam, but I would say like coming out of the pandemic, we couldn't get together, right? So then what do? But you want to do new material. So then we're kind of sending each other stuff, right? Like Tony would send us a tune, pretty realized, or I would come up with a tune with a B section and maybe a middle part too. So then, because you don't have that luxury of being able to jam as much, I think that the tunes on this record reflect more of slightly more, individual writing because of the circumstance. But Blood of Thorns was a jam. And so the idea behind my philosophy with recording is just try to get a good take. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a perfect thing. I want it to sound like the band. So the whole idea was, hey, let's just jam and get a good one. So that's what we tried to do, and hopefully we achieved that.
And
Yes.
also the luxury of recording at Dave's studio. We weren't rushed or worrying about like burning the clocks. We had enough time to do everything without worrying um about getting it done by a certain amount of time. Although we did most of the stuff in like one or two takes, but there's not the pressure, and also the with the multi-track on the being able to do multiple times too, um, which is one advantage of the digital over the analog tape. But having the luxury just to play and record till it comes out the way we like. It wasn't like a super amount of overdubs. We had the percussionist, we had Dan Klukas. We had some, coming back and fixing stuff, but it was just the sound of us playing together in a studio, which was a garage turned into a studio. And also, we've been playing those songs over and over again, so they were rehearsed just from us playing them at so many shows too. So that's how it came together. In the 90s, Carnage was a lot more jam oriented, also partially because it was a fluctuating lineup. So we'd have, you don't know who would show up, and then we weren't rehearsing with those people. So it had to be a jam. But now that's a constant lineup and we practice consistently. Um, I guess it's more tighter, but there's still improvisational elements, and we still, we'll play the same song differently, but because we rehearse it, we just have the structure more in our head.
Another thing, Joel, that I kind of discovered with Dave, well, I mean, it's with George, our singer, is that George needs to perform live. He needs to be with the band recording. So he all of his takes are our take. He's singing in the vocal booth while we're playing. Like none of that he's not doing overdubs afterwards. So George's takes are all live with the band. Those are all keeper.
Excellent. Well, the formula definitely works on this record. Grab the
I was just gonna say also that our drummer Steve Reed, he's the current bass player for Saccharine Trust too.
Oh,
So after Chris passed, they did, even when he was sick, they did some shows with Earl Liberty, and then but for the last few years, Steve's been playing bass for him.
yeah, that's good to hear. I kind of lost track of them um after Chris passed. So it's cool to hear they're still playing.
Yeah, they're still playing. They played the Hollywood Palladium about a year ago, um, with TSOL and a band called The Garden, and they're playing in September at Permanent Records at the place where Cafe Nela used to be. I think on September 21st. So they're still playing, which is really good. They got it's with Rob Holtzman back on drums too,
Oh,
the original
wow.
drummer.
Wow. That's great. That's really nice to hear. Like I said, we had a lot of great shows with them, good times with those guys. Chris was the member of the band I spoke with the most at the shows. he was always the one who was kind of like accessible and coming over and saying hello. Having said that, I got to see if I can track down Mr. Biza for one of these conversations because I'm such a fan of Saccharine Trust, and it's great to know they're still playing. Cool. So, fellows from Saccharine Trust, if you're watching this, you're very much loved. Glad to hear the band's still out there doing it, and long live Saccharine Trust, and rest in peace, Chris Stein, of course. Um, Now, you have a show coming up Friday, to coincide with the release of the record. It's actually it's at a venue I'm not too familiar with. Is it a newer place or is it something
It's
that's
an older place, but it's not like really a rock place. It's more like an art place. It's more like a theater. So they do more like jazz and poetry and theater shows. So I guess we're coming in on like the jazz poetry corner of it. It's called Art Share. It's right across the street, almost from where Al's Bar used to be. Like
Oh,
it's on
okay.
track shit or Hewitt and Fourth. Um, so it's like an old brick building, and on the downstairs they have like a big theater space. So it's good because we're doing a 7-piece lineup with Dan Klukas on trumpet, where we could actually all fit on the stage. Because that's just one of the problems with being in a band with lots of people is just all actually physically fitting. And then when you have more space, you could acoustically fit better too, because people have their own space. And then it's pretty much the electric instruments are coming with the amplifiers, so it's all point source for those. And then it just gives us a bigger stage. It makes it easier to play. So it's mostly we just play regular bars, but because it's a special occasion, we're playing this place called Art Share. We did it one time before, um, but it gives us a chance to play for a longer period of time in a bigger physical space where we could all fit better.
Hmm.
Yeah, we literally get to stretch out, Joel, which is nice, and
Because
it's
sometimes it gets like elbows in,
yeah,
if we're playing at a smaller.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
And when you're bowing, that's not too easy.
Not so easy. Um, and I like to, it's really cool that it's right across the street from Al's Bar and the American Hotel. It's in the Arts District in LA. It's a it's a collective space and gallery. So there's all these cool paintings hung up on the walls, and they have, you know, uh, revolving artists and shows there, and it's free, which is super cool too. Uh,
All
and
ages too.
yeah, and all ages. And Anna Broom is the one who puts on this show. It's her room. It's called the Anna Broom Room, and it's a great room. It kind of, like Dave was saying, it's almost like a little bit old industrial LA with brick and exposed pipes, and it's just a big old room, which is really cool to play in. It looks kind of like when you watch bands there, it's sort of like a jazz thing, like when you see John Coltrane in 1964 on TV from Germany or something like that. It kind of has this industrial look about it, which is great. And I just like that, people can pull up a chair if they want to. There's a ton of chairs just up against the wall. People can relax and sit. They don't have to, there's no codes, you just
Hmm.
come and hang out. It's free.
Very cool. And again,
But it
that
is an old building for LA because it had to be made before the 1933 earthquake because it's a like a brick building on wooden pillars.
mm.
So hopefully there's not another earthquake when we encounter. But
Well,
it stood up through the 1933, 71. Yeah, it stood up through a bunch of earthquakes so far.
it just needs to stay up until the 24th, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Because again, you're playing there this Friday, the 23rd, and you have another show coming up, which would be See if I have the info here. You're actually playing the 30th as well in August at Supply and Demand in Long Beach, and you're opening for the Zeros that night. And I've been away from LA way too long. Is Supply and Demand a new place, or has that been around for a while as well?
It's been around for a little bit, but it's relatively new. It's in Long Beach. This will be our first time playing there. But we're really excited to be playing with the Zeros.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's I mean, when the Germs played their first show, they were opening up for the Weirdos and the Zeros. When the Weirdos played their first show, they were opening up for the Zeros. They were like, you know, I guess, them and the Dills were what started punk in San Diego and were like kind of some of the original punk bands in California. And they were innovators, and just to be able to open for them is pretty exciting for us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's always something I remember when I was out in LA is you'd have these bills where there would be kind of the newer bands, the bands who've been around for a bit, and then like the classic band, and somehow there would still be like one or two bands from the 70s on these bills even today. And it's fantastic to see, a band like the Zero still doing things in 2024, and obviously, you've got the TSOLs of the world still doing things, and there's always such a rich history to Los Angeles music, which kind of leads me to let the viewer know who would be unaware. Dave, you have this entire wonderful career in film and video, and you've done tremendous work in both fields. Um, and I would encourage anyone to look up Dave's filmography and videography. It's kind of staggering. But one of the things you've done in your career is you put out a tremendous documentary a few years ago called A History Lesson Part One, which kind of chronicles certain mid '80s bands, let's say, performances from around that time. The Minutemen, Twisted Roots, one of my all-time favorite bands, Red Cross, mid '80s era Red Cross. You've got some great interviews with musicians in there as well. So it's a tremendous sort of time capsule of that time period. So I would recommend people can, definitely check that out. And I'll put some information in the video description on some of your other work as well. Make sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and you mentioned that you have these upcoming shows, and you mentioned how this new album sort of came out of the COVID era, which thankfully we're largely past at this point, and live music is a regular occurrence again, thankfully. Um, how is LA doing? I think of LA often because it's been a while since I've been there, and I haven't been there since the pandemic. How is the live music scene faring these days out there, especially in light of what we've all seen the last 4 years?
There's still constant good shows. You know, I I'm gonna go to see a show tonight. Steve Gregoropoulos and Quasar and the Bamboozled. Yeah, I just saw Off do their final show. They were great. I can. There's still, if especially if you like different kinds of music, there's always a chance to see good music in LA. It's not. There's a place called the Sardine we like to play in San Pedro. That's kind of a nucleus now. Um, there's not really a nucleus place up here at the time, or at least for us. But um, in my whole life, since going to shows starting in 1982, there's times where it's more active than others, but I've always found great music in Los Angeles. And starting out in the early 80s, you could still see the people that were left over from the 60s, and some of the people from the 50s were still playing. And now we're older than those people were.
David, what do you think? How are things looking for you?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of shows still going on. lots of different venues. There's a bunch of different places have kind of opened up. I do really like the Sardine in terms of keeping that kind of D-Boon spirit going. They have D-Boon on the walls and um, which is great. So there's a definitely a Minutemen homage, and we feel really at home playing there, and very welcomed down there. But I, there's always good shows going on. There was just like the Echo Park Rising just happened yesterday, and my son went to that. It's for the younger folks. But there's always good stuff. And some places closed down, and we were sad that Dave kind of finally let go of Cafe Nela. It was another great place in LA that you could always see incredible shows, and I'm really proud of Dave for creating a venue that was as cool as Mr. T's or Al's Bar in my book, any of those great places that we've had. And, but now you've got Permanent Records Roadhouse, and he's doing a lot of shows there too. So the tradition keeps going. And there's a lot of new places. There's the Escondite Bar, which I haven't been to. I've heard some good things about in downtown, and there'll always be, some places around.
That's
But
great. Oh,
yeah, I mean, but Friday I saw Javier Escobedo and Mike Watt and the Alley Cats play. Like I said, the show I'm going to tonight. Then next weekend, I have a whole weekend planned. We're playing Friday. Then Saturday is our friend Dule Toledo's birthday party. So they're having like Somos Misteriosos and Master Cylinder and Beat Mistress playing. And then it's also our friends, Swords of Fatima, doing the record release party. And so they're playing with the Probe. And then Sunday, unfortunately, Johnny Stingray, who was the guitar player of the Controllers, passed away. And that's another person that really got things started in LA. But they're doing the memorial for him at the Redwood, and that's Mike Watt and Alley Cats and Star Party.
Billy
So
Bones, yeah, Billy
Billy
Bones.
Bones. It'll be a musical weekend, and there's a lot of musical weekends like that in Los Angeles. We're blessed to live here for that.
it's so great to hear things are how they are right now out there, because that's how it was for me 20 years ago. And I was very nervous about asking that question because I didn't want to hear, oh, it's dead.
Yeah,
So I love the fact that the culture of LA is healthy in that respect, because for me, being an East Coaster, growing up in suburban New Jersey, and then finding myself living in Los Angeles, it really was like going to a candy store musically, because at any given night, you'd have so many options, and just running and ending up at shows and not really not knowing what to expect. How you and I met, David,
yeah,
many, many years ago. I went to the Echo to see the Urinals, and the Urinals had canceled for whatever reason. And I was actually going to leave. I was with my girlfriend at the time. We were going to go, and I ran into you, and you're like, no, no, don't leave. My band's playing. I'm like, what's your band? Magnolia Thunder Pussy. And I'm like, yeah, we'll stay. And I was blown away. I was so happy to see that show. And we've been friends ever since. So that's an LA story. You end up in a room for some reason, and you end up meeting somebody who gets it, and vice versa. And as a matter of fact, David, Abby sang that day, as I recall, at the Echo. Your sister Abby, who's
Hmm.
an accomplished singer as well. Um, Viewer, look up Abby Travis. You'll be blown away. So that is very encouraging. It makes me realize I have to get back out to LA soon so I can take advantage of some of this stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'd love to see you, Joel. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Come on,
Well,
Carnage show.
oh, I'd
Carnage is
love
Saccharine
to.
Trust show.
Oh man, I would be in heaven. And I was so happy to hear your new record when I did, because it's the summertime, and I was planning to get out to Los Angeles this summer for a vacation. It just didn't work out logistically. So I'm a little homesick right now for that world. So your album came at the perfect time. It gave me a chance to reconnect with you both. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that we've been able to reconnect. And, after so many years, we can still have a chat about things in the here and now that are happening, and new things and new shows and new music. So again, I would encourage anyone watching this, if you're in the area, go see Carnage Asada this Friday. Check them out on the 30th as well. I will include tons of information in the video description on these shows, on the new record, on the band in general, on Dave's work. So there'll be tons of stuff to check out, and I would encourage everyone to do so. But in the meantime, let's not wait another 12 or so years until we do another interview. Let's definitely keep in touch, and I wish you all the very best with the new album and with the band. And it's just a joy to know. I can't imagine Los Angeles without Carnage Asada. I just can't. So it's so cool that I don't have to worry about that because you're still part of it. If you guys ever went away, I'd be worried about Los Angeles. But it's nice to know I don't have that worry right now. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us, Joel. Thank you so much. So good to see you again.
Great to see you guys. We'll have to do this again sometime. Like I said, let's not wait a bunch of years. Let's do something. And with a bit of luck, I'll be seeing you in person the next time this happens. So
Yes.